apartment a month ago. I found something I thought seemed like a good deal. From the pictures, the couch seemed to be in great shape. The seller wanted to be contacted by email. His email was mexicanpoppy666@hotmail.com. I felt that email was a bit off-putting, but I still went ahead and emailed him my offer. He responded within 5 minutes accepting the offer and asking for my address. I honestly felt uncomfortable with his asking. I did not. Eventually I stopped responding, and a day later, he emailed me again, giving me his address. I didn't know if I should go at that point, but it seemed like a steal, almost too good to be true. And according to his address, he didn't live too far. So I got in my van and drove over to the seller's house. I immediately noticed that the house was a bit smaller than all the other houses on the block. When I rang the bell, a middle-aged man wearing a baseball cap answered the door. He gave me a huge smile and invited me in. I was immediately feeling uneasy. He led me into his living room, and I saw the couch. Immediately, I saw scuff marks and small tears in the couch. It was not at all in the shape that it appeared in the ad. I commented on this, and he just smiled and offered to lower the price. I told him I'm not interested, and here's where things started getting creepy. As I was making my way out of the house, he put his hand on my shoulder and offered to give it to me for free if I was willing to, quote-unquote, give something to him. I let out a disgusted gasp and got back into my car. I didn't even look up out the window. I just drove away from there quickly. But it doesn't end there. That same night, I was laying in my bed watching TV, and I thought I heard somebody stomping up the steps of my porch. I muted the TV and was able to clearly hear the sound of somebody fiddling with my front doorknob. I jumped out of my bed and I thought I could hear the sound of the gate to the backyard opening and closing. That was when I grabbed the phone and dialed 911. Soon after, I heard the sound of somebody fiddling with the doorknob to the back door of the apartment. I yelled to whoever it was that the police were on their way, and after that, I heard the sound of the gate opening and closing again. They were gone. This was a month ago and nothing has happened since, but I still can't sleep at night. I'm 99% sure it was the man that was selling the couch. He must have followed me home. There's no way it was just a coincidence. I don't plan on using Craigslist anymore, and I'm still trying to find a new apartment. Number 2. I was looking for a car to buy for my son for his 18th birthday. I was searching all the typical car websites, cars.com, eBay Motors. They were all overpriced as expected. Craigslist was the only place to find an actual deal. About a week into my search, I found an 03 Toyota Camry. It had 67,000 miles, no accidents, no damage, and good condition for only $3,500. This seems like a steal for such a reliable car with such low mileage. The seller lived about 10 miles from me, which was a reasonable drive when looking for a car. I gave him a call to set up a time to come check it out. The man sounded normal on the phone. He assured me that there were absolutely no problems with the car. He introduced himself as Bob. I brought along $3,500 in cash, even though I planned on wiggling down the price as much as possible. I pulled up the dirt road to Bob's property about 15 minutes early. It was a tiny little house with a decent-sized property, only because it was a bit far from the nearest neighbors. The garage was open, so I walked over to see if anybody was inside, but except for an unusual amount of car parts, it was empty. The car was nowhere in sight. The only car on the property was an old pickup truck. I went over to the front door to check the house numbers. It was the right address. The doorbell button was missing, so I knocked on the front door. I knocked for exactly 5 minutes before deciding to give the man a call. So I dialed his number and I heard the sound of a cell phone ringing from inside the house. I was extremely confused at this point. Now I knew I had the right house. I didn't understand why, if he was home, why he wasn't answering. I decided I had to take a peek through one of the windows to see if anybody was inside. Peering through the glass, I couldn't really see much as it was pretty dark inside the house. I saw a very old-fashioned dining room set, but across from that, I saw somebody standing at the back door of the house, staring outside. I figured that must have been Bob, so I knocked on the window, but he didn't even move. There was no gate or anything to the backyard. It was just a wide open yard, since this wasn't a rural area. I simply walked around the house to the backyard. I didn't understand how he couldn't hear me. When I got to the back door, I made a shocking realization. The figure standing by the door was a taxidermied human being. I ran straight back the way I came and back to my car. I looked up one last time before driving off. The blinds to the window I had peeked into had been shut, but I could see two of the blinds bent open. Somebody was at that window watching me. You can probably guess I had the gas pedal to the floor the whole way home. The whole situation still makes no sense. All the car parts, the fact that there was no Toyota Camry, the taxidermied human being. The fact that there was no car there leads me to believe that whoever that man wasn't planning on selling me anything. And that also leads to the disturbing thought that I was very close to becoming a lifeless statue staring out that man's back door. Number 1. I was looking to buy the iPhone 5 about a year ago. I found a guy on Craigslist who was selling his for $200. He claimed it was in mint condition and that he wanted to upgrade to the 5C. I didn't know much about how to go about testing a phone to make sure everything works, so I brought my little brother along who knew a lot more than I did. Large, intimidating guys stepped out of a black Honda Civic and walked over to us. One of the guys pulled out the phone and showed it to me. It didn't have a scratch on it. My brother took out my SIM card and popped it into this new phone. He did some testing and told me that it works. The guy then asked for $250, even though he originally asked for $200. I lied and told him I only brought $200, and he seemed a bit unhappy with this. I did have $250, but I didn't want to spend more than his original asking price. I kind of figured it was his way of making sure I didn't haggle down the price. I handed the guy the $200, and he and his buddy got back in their car. We got back into my car, and I tested out the new phone by calling my girlfriend. I sat testing things around for about 5 minutes. My brother commented on the fact that the two guys hadn't left yet either, but I didn't really care. I started the car and pulled out of the parking lot. My brother then commented that the two guys started their car just as I had. I didn't find it too weird. I drove down the turnpike and eventually stopped at a red light. That's when I noticed the black Honda Civic pull up right behind us in my rearview mirror. I found that a bit weird since I was sure they came from the opposite direction. I continued my drive home, but every single turn we made, they followed, and close on my tail too. My brother suggested I pull over, but there was no way I was going to do that. I knew those guys were looking for trouble. It got to the point where I was trying to lose them and started driving dangerously. If they needed something, they would call or at least honk their horn, but they were looking for some kind of trouble. I tried something risky to lose them. At an intersection, the light had just turned red. I floored it across the intersection before any of the cars would begin to pass. My brother shouted at me, calling me stupid and crazy, but it worked. They didn't follow. We got home after the extra long drive. My heart was still racing from the intensity of the situation. I was just happy I got a working phone for such a low cost. Later that night, I was playing around with the phone trying to set some things up before going to bed. My parents and brother were already asleep at this point, and just then, the sound of 2 car doors slamming shut outside interrupted me. I looked out my window, and I felt like my heart completely stopped. The black Honda Civic was parked across the street. I could only assume the 2 guys were already halfway to our front door. I immediately woke up my dad and explained everything as quickly as possible. He got up, grabbed a baseball bat, and crouched behind the front door. A loud knock came at the front door. My dad screamed at them to go away. One of the guys on the other side of the door claimed to have a gun and said that he would shoot the lock off of the door if he didn't open up. My dad told me to call Joe, our friend who lives 2 doors down who happens to be a police officer. I called Joe and he said he would be right over and to stay hidden. Here's the part that still scares me to this day. There was the sound of a silenced shot of a pistol. I peeked over and saw a bullet hole in the door, inches away from my dad's head. My dad ran away from the door and we all listened. We heard Joe outside yelling at them to drop their weapons. My dad went outside to help when they lowered their guns. Joe arrested the two assholes. I have to say, this was the scariest day of my life, but it was also the best I had ever felt in my entire life. This is a popular story with my family and most of my friends. Amanda is my brother's girlfriend. At the time of this story, she was looking for her first apartment and moving out of her parents' house. Her and my brother didn't want to move together since they'd only been dating for a few months. She opted instead to search for a roommate online. Browsing Craigslist, she found an ad titled something like, "Roommate Wanted, Females Only." This sort of thing was common since the area she was looking in was mostly young professionals. The listing was for a room in a house for about $225 a month, which was quite cheap compared to most of the other places listed. The occupant listed herself as a 23-year-old college student. So far, Amanda was into this place. However, the listing only had a single photo from outside the property. Amanda sent an email wanting to meet the occupant and tour the house. Within 30 minutes, she receives an email back with all the details and time to stop by. The girl worked late hours and wanted Amanda to stop by at 8 p.m. When Amanda arrives, there's a handwritten note on the front door saying, "Door broken, use back door." Walking around the house, it looks nice but slightly unkempt. Tall grass, weeds, dusty windows, etc. Still no alarms for Amanda though. When she knocks on the back door, an older man opens the door. At first, Amanda thinks that she has the wrong house, but the man reassures her and says that the occupant was out and that he was the landlord. The occupant asked him to meet Amanda since she was working late. He seemed pleasant and offered to show her around. Alarms start going off but aren't at red alert yet. First, the guy was clearly in his 40s, unshaven, and looked like he lived in his car. Also, only the kitchen light was on.
It is most fortunate you were able to return with the Jade Talisman so quickly.
No sweat. Saxon's
Nothing.
White Dragon Feng Shui Club or Big Win.
Questions, but
Do
seemed
not
irritable to
underestimate
keeping the
our
lights
enemy.
on for too long,
The theft
rushing
of
her
the
around
talisman
and
was
only
merely
letting her
a
look at rooms
distraction.
for a few moments.
Saxon is no
There
doubt
was a
planning
single
a
room that the
counterattack as we
landlord
speak.
wouldn't open,
I
telling her
will,
that it was the
Master.
occupant's room and
I
he
think
didn't want to
it's
invade her
time I met
privacy.
this Saxon.
As they walked down the
Face to
hall into the
face.
living room,
It would
she
be
notices the front
unwise
door
to
has a
attack
plank
Saxon
nailed
until
across
we
it,
know what he is planning.
quote-unquote broken
One
for
of my
sure.
students has infiltrated
Amanda's
the White Dragon
creepometer is starting
shipyard.
to ding,
He
so
may
she
have
decides to
learned of
wrap up the
Saxon's
walkthrough
plans.
and leave, but trying to be
A
polite.
mole on the inside.
As she's giving the guy
Hey,
her
good
thanks for
thinking,
the showing,
Master.
but
You
he
must seek
perks
him
up
out,
and states
find
that he
out what
forgot
he
to
has
show her the
learned,
basement.
then return to me.
He claims it's recently furnished and would
Sneak
be a
into the
great rec room, and
shipyards,
she
dig
should
up
take a
the
look down
mole,
there.
pumping for info,
At the
then
time,
give you
Amanda and the
skinny.
landlord are
Got
standing
it,
in the small
Master.
hallway between the
May
front
the
living
fist
room
be
and the
with
back
you, Crypto.
kitchen. In this little hallway was the basement door. When he opens the door, it opens outward to create something of a barrier between Amanda and the back door.
We have the same
The basement is pitch black. He smiles, motions down the stairs, and says, "Ladies first." What happens next is nothing more than a stroke of luck. Amanda gets a text just as some random person parks in front of the house. Thinking
I've
on her
marked
feet,
the
she
location of
pretends
the
it's a phone
shipyard
call
on
and
your
answers her
radar.
phone.
Yeah.
Yeah, are you here? I'll come out from around back and let you in.
Boats
You have
in
to
the
see it.
water. Thanks for
With
the
a motion of
help.
confidence, she excuses
You'll
herself
never
around the
cease to
landlord
test the
and walks out
limits
of
of
the
my
back door.
patience.
She says the guy just looked at her like he was confused. Once outside, she sprinted to her car and sped like hell out of there.
Temporal
When Amanda
fish.
got home, she told her mother and my brother everything. Cops were called. They took her statement and went to investigate. The Craigslist
Rain
post had been
collector
removed.
coming through.
The house had been foreclosed over 6 months earlier. It was found out that the house had been foreclosed over 6 months earlier, and the property had been abandoned. When the police investigated, they found that the closed room that the so-called landlord didn't want her to look in was where the man had been staying. There was a pile of old dirty blankets, rotten food, and empty gallon jugs everywhere. More creepy was he had plastered ripped-up pages from porno magazines on all the walls in the room. The really scary part of this was the basement. The man had tied a thin piece of fishing twine at about shin level across the stairs about halfway down. The basement was empty except another pile of old blankets, a broom handle wrapped in leather belts, and a small box with a few rolls of assorted tape. I was up late looking for goalie equipment on Craigslist some night in the summer. I was only 14 and had no job and therefore no money, so I had to find the cheapest deal possible. I didn't really care about the condition of anything. I came across an ad that seemed like a steal. The pictures showed the pads, blocker, glove, and stick. They were all in visibly good condition. It was only listed for $50. That seemed like an insane deal. I contacted the seller via text, and he asked me a few questions, one of which was how old I am. I responded 14, and he told me he's glad to hear that I'm dedicated at a young age. It didn't really seem weird to me what he said at the time, but now that I look back on it, I should have been wiser. I asked the seller for his address, but he instead asked me what town I'm from, and that he could just meet me somewhere walking distance from my house. I didn't know how I felt about this, but I really wanted that equipment. We agreed to meet in the parking lot of the mall, which is literally down the block from my house. I stood alone in the exact spot I described for a few minutes, until I heard somebody toot their horn. I noticed a white van parked away from all the other cars, and then I received a text saying that he was in the white van. I replied telling him to come out with the equipment, but he said it would be easier to do the transaction in the van. I had a really bad feeling about this and hightailed away from there. I ran down the block, and when I looked back, I saw the white van driving down the street behind me. Now there was someone in the passenger side as well. I didn't want to lead them to my house, so I cut into some random person's backyard and hopped over the fence. I was on the opposite side of the block now, hiding behind a bush. Within 20 seconds, the white van passed by and turned the next turn, vanishing from sight. It was safe to run back to my house now. My parents flipped shit on me when I told them about it. I didn't get the tag number or a good look at their faces, so all they could report was a suspicious white van. The Craigslist ad was taken down, so I couldn't show it to my parents. I thought it was over, but that night, I heard a vehicle engine running outside. I looked out my window down to the street and saw the white van sitting across the street. But as soon as I looked out the window, the van drove off down the road out of sight. I haven't seen it since. It makes me paranoid to this day. I was selling a dining room set on Craigslist. I listed it for $1,200, but put slightly negotiable in the title. It was a good-looking set, but I wasn't getting any offers. I did live in the country though, so I thought I'd keep it in the The man on the other end of the phone had a very shaky voice, and he sounded a bit off, but I can't really explain how. He wanted to check out the set to make an offer, so I gave him my address, and he said he would be over within the hour. I dusted off all the furniture one more time to make it look as nice as possible. The doorbell rang within 10 minutes. I was shocked. He must have lived really close, which in my area was very surprising. I opened the door and immediately felt uncomfortable about letting this man into my house. He was wearing a white undershirt with yellow stains scattered all over it. His pants were way too baggy and had a few tears in them. His gray mustache stained brown in the middle, and his hair a complete mess. Basically everything you shouldn't look in public, he looked. Basically everything you shouldn't look in public, he looked. He greeted me with a hello in the same shaky voice as before. I invited him in and he immediately caught a glimpse of the dining room set, since the dining room is the first room you see in the house. He began walking around really slowly, making weird sounds and making sure to feel every inch of every piece of furniture. I was very weirded out watching this and decided to break the silence by bringing up the price.
That's right.
I
I'm the
reminded him that
inside
my
guy.
asking price was $1,200.
Okay,
And then he
inside
stopped,
guy.
looked up at
I
me,
want to know
and gave
about
me the
This
most
is about
unnerving
Rollo and the
smile
Jade
I had ever
Talisman,
seen.
isn't it?
How about
Yeah,
500?
it is.
He asked me.
All the
I
white
laughed a bit
dragons
at
are
the
talking
insane
about the
offer,
number you
almost
did
thinking
on
he was
Rollo.
joking. But when his smile
they
turned to an
are.
angry expression,
Go
I knew he
on,
wasn't.
inside
I
guy.
apologized and
Tell
told
me
him that's
more.
much too low
Saxon
for
is
me.
planning a massive
The lowest I would
counterattack
be
in
willing to go is
retaliation.
1,000.
You'll never guess
The
where.
man then started
I
acting
don't have
even
to
weirder.
guess, Monkey
He put his
Brain.
hands up
You're
to his
gonna
head
tell
and started
me,
making
or I'll
strange
take you back to
noises again,
Saxon's men and
pacing
yell,
back and forth.
Snitch!
Saxon's
Then
men
looked at
are
me
going to attack
with
the
a look of
monastery
anger and
itself.
hatred.
The
This man was not right in the
monastery.
head. I realized it just then and there.
Good thing
and
you
I
found me
needed
when
him
you
out of my
did.
house.
If you hurry back to the
I
monastery, you
apologized
may
to him
have a
again and
chance
thanked
to
him for
save
coming,
it.
which was the most obvious way of me letting him know
Don't
it was
look
time for
now,
him to
but
leave.
we've got
But he
company.
didn't move.
Sorry,
At this point,
Charlie.
the stare he
You
was
hold
giving
him
me was
off. I've
obviously
got
a
to get
stare
back
of
to the
malice.
island. I'll
This
tell
man
the
was much
master
bigger
you
than
died
me,
with
and I didn't think I
honor.
could take him in a fight. But then the man moved his hand to his back pocket, and I quickly assumed he was reaching for a gun.
Master, I know about
I ran
Saxon's
upstairs to my bedroom to my
plan.
closet,
His White
leaving the man
Dragon
alone in the
Feng
dining
Shui
room.
Club is going
In my
to
closet,
invade
I
the
grabbed my
island.
45, loaded it, and took cover behind the
A
wall,
bold
sneaking a
move.
peek into the dining
I
room.
never thought you would dare
The man was
launch a
gone.
direct attack against me.
I went back to my
Well,
room and locked the
think
door.
it now.
I called the
They're
police
here.
and took cover
My
behind my bed
students,
in the
the
meantime.
academy, my
It felt
teachings.
like hours before
all
I
are
heard
at
the police
stake.
sirens outside my
You
house.
must help defend us.
However, I stayed put behind my bed. For all I knew, that man was right outside my bedroom door. Thankfully, I hadn't locked the door, and I heard the police enter my house. I left the bedroom with my hands raised and showed them my ID. They had me wait outside while they continued their search. I sat there for probably 5 minutes before the two
Defend the
police
monastery.
officers stepped out of my
Use your
house
saucer to shoot
with
down
the
our
man in
attackers.
handcuffs.
I thought
They
you
told me
said
something disturbing.
technology and
He was hiding
weapons
in
was
an
the
empty
easy
closet
way
with a
out.
loaded gun. I
Sometimes
feel
the
it's
odds
only a
are against
miracle that
sticking
the
to
police weren't
principle.
shot at.
One must
But the
adapt.
thing that still haunts me the most to this day was the look that that man gave me through the window of the police car as it drove off. A look of malice and hatred. Like the first thing he would plan to do after getting out of jail would be to come back for me. I'm still thinking about moving. I can't deal with the constant paranoia of that man coming back. All I can say that can be learned from this is to be very careful when giving your address to people from Craigslist.
More enemies arriving!
It was the summer of 2012. I had a late birthday, so I was still 15 and my friends were 16. They all had jobs for the summer. Nobody would hire me because I was only 15. I started looking for off the books jobs on Craigslist.
Here comes another wave of triumph!
Looking for house cleaning services, paying $10 an hour. We had our two pictures of the house, one outside and one inside. It was a typical middle-class
The
house.
monastery is in danger.
He lived in the next town over.
Thanks for the update,
The only way to contact
Bubblehead.
him
I
was
got
by
it
email.
covered.
So I emailed him, telling him I was only 15 years old and was willing to clean his house for $10 an hour. He responded in 10 minutes, telling me his work schedule and when he would be. I told him that was okay, and then he asked me if I had means of transportation to get there every day.
Here comes another wave of triumph.
He would drive me every day. He offered to give me a lift to and from every single day. He said he worked close, so coming home to give me a ride wouldn't be a problem. I agreed without even asking him why.
Crypto, you must
So
see
the
the
man asked for my
monastery.
address. I
You
gave it to him,
think?
and he said he would be over at 8:30 a.m. on Monday to pick me up. Come Monday, heading outside, he drove a black 05 Nissan Maxima. He himself had a black beard and a Mets hat on. He didn't seem dressed ready to go to work, but I didn't think much of it. He introduced himself as James, and then dropped me off and gave me the key. He told me to just straighten everything out and such. Then he drove off in a hurry. I found it really weird that he trusted me, a 15-year-old he had never met, to clean his house alone. His house wasn't even too messy. All I did was just fold some clothes, wash some
Crypto,
dishes,
the monastery
and
is
used a hand
crumbling.
vacuum to clean some of the carpets.
Little busy
The
here.
only problem was extremely hot in the house, even hotter than outside. It seemed all the windows were sealed.
The monastery is saved!
But honor is not restored.
He gave me $60 and dropped me off back home. He seemed extremely nice, and I felt I had lucked out finding that ad. This went on for a good 2 weeks, and my mom was okay with it since James was actually paying me. Then, one Friday night, I woke up feeling really thirsty, so I got up to get some water. I looked out my window, and I saw somebody standing there looking into my room. I screamed, and my parents came running over, but the person outside took off before they got there.
What the hell did I just say?
The next time I went in, it was at least 100 degrees outside. I asked James if I could turn on the AC, but he said it was broken.
I heard the
He told me to just take off my clothes if I got hot.
You heard right.
I laughed, thinking he was joking, but he was serious.
So,
I felt really uncomfortable after that.
Has been reduced to.
He dropped me off, and I did the same work that I had been doing.
Are pathetic.
It was at least 105 degrees in the house. I had to work shirtless and constantly go outside where it was just a little cooler. The day dragged on, but I just barely made it through.
Come back here.
The next day, on the way to his house, James told me that he had the day off from work. He told me he would just help me out. I was not happy to hear this. I would rather just be alone in the house.
Saxon grows more bored with each attack.
Whatever room I went to clean.
It is time for us to take the
I
battle to
eventually
him.
had to go to the bathroom.
We
so
will
I ran
strike him where it
upstairs
hurts
to
the
make sure he wasn't
most.
following me.
His
But in
bottom
the bathroom,
line,
I made a
right?
shocking discovery.
Ah, you are learning,
Up in the
Crypto.
corner of the room, I found a small camera.
Saxon
pointing
has
from out of
business
the
interests
wall,
all
just
over
barely
Shenlong.
visible. I scanned
You
the
must
room for
eradicate
more,
them.
and sure enough,
I'll
there was one in the
destroy
bottom corner as
Saxon if
well.
I have to
I
vaporize
started
every
searching the whole
building
bathroom
in
for more cameras.
Shenlong.
I checked under the sink, but what I found was much worse.
Long.
There were 2 huge stacks of VHS tapes, each one with a sticky note attached with someone's name on it. The one on the top was my name. I almost threw up then and there. I had to find a way to get home safely. James then knocked on the door, asking if I was alright. I said I wasn't feeling good, and asked if he could drive me home. He said okay. I stepped outside, and he told me he had to go as well, so he stepped into the bathroom. For the first half of the car ride, he didn't say anything to me.